Scott, do you have a hickey? Is that a hickey?
No,
What happened?
I just scratched.
Oh, okay. You really scratched it.
You're listening to Cultivate, a podcast about the people and technology that are blazing a trail in the cannabis industry.
This is episode 4, Scott, of what do we call this again?
Cultivate.
Cultivate. It's a podcast. We're casting pods. It's a podcast brought to you by Boveda, right?
Are we starting right
Good
now?
morning, Scott. Yeah, we're on.
Always
We
ask
can start
yourself,
whenever you want to.
Has the show
What I'm excited
started
about,
yet?
I just want to get this out of the way. 2 people joining the show today. Can we call it a show? It's a podcast. Can we call it a show? Or should we call it the cast?
Let's call it the cast.
The cast. Two people, 2 new cats joining the cast today.
I like that.
Lance Lambert. Lance Lambert, ladies and gentlemen.
Romance.
Lance's new title is the Strategic Business Unit Manager for Cannabis at Boveda. We're super excited that you joined the team. Lance has got a storied history. We met him through Weed Maps and through the Cannabis in Denver.
Yep.
A journalist and just an all-around great guy that everybody in the industry loves. So we're trying to take advantage of your industry love. So welcome to Boveda.
Thank you. Thank
And
you. I appreciate
then Benjamin, is that how you say it?
If you were in Spain, yeah.
Benjamin?
Benjamin will work.
Benjamin Patock?
Yeah.
He's
Well,
the,
in German, I would say Benjamin Patock.
in German.
Yeah.
Okay.
It
But
sounded
we
so
should
good.
repeat it a
Can
few
we,
times so people
Drew,
know
can we
who
hear
are.
you try that?
Benjamin Patock.
That's pretty good.
Patock.
Pa.
So he's the sales and marketing head for our European market. So we've got Europe here. We've got one of your world. So,
Yes, yes.
And you're Europe. So the whole object of the exercise is to have a conversation with you guys about this growing, crazy, wonderful cannabis business. So
Definitely.
where we thought we'd start is just generally the current state of the business on both sides of the world. So take it away, Europe.
Uh-huh.
What's happening in Europe?
Oh, many things. Many good things. Many not so good things. But at the end, I mean, people, when you think about Europe, right, everybody thinks about Amsterdam and going to Amsterdam and just buy weed everywhere. And the funny thing is that it used to be like this. It's actually that they're toning down. For instance, Amsterdam, over the period of the last 5 years, pretty much half of the coffee shops in Amsterdam have closed. Not many people know that, and not many people even know that while it's legal to buy your recreational cannabis, I will allowed to say weed, your recreational cannabis in a coffee shop. The coffee shops themselves, they buy on the black market.
Yeah, can you explain kind of that whole process? Because I had no idea that that's how it was. I just thought you go there and you can get cannabis or weed wherever you want, and it's just free reign. But it really doesn't sound like that.
Well, as a consumer, you can go to a coffee shop and just buy and consume there. You're not allowed to consume in the street anywhere, so people might still do it like everywhere else on this planet, but you can buy there. But they're only allowed to have, I think 50 grams or something
50
like
grams
this.
on site.
Yeah.
At the coffee shop.
Period.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
if you think about the pounds that we have, just to compare both sides of the pond, we don't have a cap on poundage that can be at a dispensary here, especially one that's vertically integrated, because they can literally be growing it in the backyard.
Yeah. And just
in the back of the
50 grams,
operation.
50 grams, just like 3.5-4 ounces, something like this. So it's not much.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, is it they can only have 50 grams per day?
On
or
site. So
On
they have
site
it
at the
outside. So
same
they have
time.
couriers, which have a pretty important job.
Yeah.
In that
So they
whole
really
grand
have to
scheme of things.
restash several times a day, especially now with the demand is still there. There are more and more tourists. I mean, every 4th or 5th tourist coming to Amsterdam is planning to go to a coffee shop and consume there. So the demand is still there, but the coffee shops, they're closing down. They had new regulations that you have to be without this and this radius outside of a school. You're not allowed to have. This is why one of the biggest, one of the oldest coffee shops in Amsterdam had to close down. The Mellow Yellow, it had to close down. And these type of things. So the Dutch government really isn't all about legalization and all these type of things. They just wanted to get rid of, like the black market, like one end of the black market, but at the same time they're firing up the rear end. It's really kind of weird.
Yeah, it's so these couriers go to what used to be local growers. So they actually had growers that were growing in their attics, not so much basements there, like Colorado, where it used to be black market. So growing their attics, and these couriers going back and forth. Exactly to Benny's point, they thought they cut off the head by getting rid of the illegal grows, but now they're sourcing the cannabis from outside the country. So to his point, while they were trying to eliminate black market, they actually took it deeper.
Yeah, it almost
Into
seems
the
like they're
black market.
encouraging illegal activity or black market.
So is there any future in sight where the black market goes away, or will there always be a black market in the industry?
I think there will always be a black market in the
I mean,
industry.
you still have a black market even where it's legal, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
It is, because you have, that's one thing I had a bit of an epiphany when with the cannabis, was downtown in the lower downtown district of Denver, sitting across from a dispensary and from a 5-star restaurant that had valet out front. And I kept seeing vehicles pull up, Mercedes and BMWs and minivans. I'm like, oh, it's the parents doing a date night out. But they kept leaving these cars parked out front, and the people would come back out 5 minutes later. I realized they were going into the dispensary to get their cannabis to be able to tolerate their kid's soccer game for 3 hours on Saturday. That's when I had the epiphany. I'm like, wow, it's not so much the younger generation that is coming on to the legalization side. It's those in the Gen X, those in the baby boomer generation that didn't have drug dealers all the time, that haven't been consuming cannabis for the last 4, 5, 10, 15 years. So exactly at Benny's point, there will always be a black market. It's a big debate in California with the taxes in some places reaching as high as 45%. Right now we're paying about $10 a gram. So you're getting an eighth for about $35, $40 for really decent bud. And with the 45% tax rate, who's going to pay $70, $75 for the same product? When you're charged more for a product, normally you expect additional features, advantages, and benefits thereof. But you're literally getting the same weed. It's just now the tax man's coming in and bumping it. So again, to Benny's point, even in legal markets, unfortunately, because of the way government works, I think there will always be a black market too.
Yeah, I mean, especially since there will always be like at least one guy who's not willing to pay taxes, you know?
So in Europe, what countries are most welcoming to the cannabis industries, and what countries are more rigid about it?
Yeah, so I would say like the most progressive, if you want to put it this way, is still, I would still count the Netherlands in, because they are the only place where you can legally buy recreational cannabis. I would count Spain in with their system of the cannabis social clubs. We can talk about this in a second, which is really special. I would count Italy in, even though it is illegal, but they have a strong movement towards legalization recently. Whereas other places that might seem so, for instance, the UK doesn't have a medical cannabis program up to yet. They induced it now, you know, and probably they're gonna have a bill maybe beginning of next year, but up to now they don't have it.
Yeah.
While medical cannabis is that most Western countries have a medical cannabis program. I think Norway is one of the few ones that doesn't have them, but the rest, I mean, and then some of the states they have some weird type of takes on this. For instance, in Austria, it is legal to buy a cannabis plant, but it's illegal to flower it. You know, so they sell it as they sell it as an ornament, you know, to your living room. And you know, this is a country.
Because ferns are overrated.
Yeah,
Just in
ferns.
case you're wondering.
They're just not that pretty. You know, they're just not that pretty.
Wasn't
And
there
they
a
have
country too that only you can buy seeds?
Yeah, but the funny thing is that you have to think about like just this Switzerland. But in Austria, for instance, I think they're like 8 million people, and they sell, I don't know, like 100,000 plants per month. So it's really green living rooms up down there. You know, it's like really green. And yeah, in Switzerland, you're allowed to buy seeds, and most of the other countries like Germany, you're not allowed to buy seeds. But you're not allowed to plant them in Switzerland. So they buy them as collectibles. So you're a seed collector. So hey, you want to trade one of mine with one of yours? You know, so it's really fun. Yeah. So.
Lance, can you characterize the state of the business in the U.S. as far as where it's booming, where it's stuck?
Definitely.
Rec versus medical.
Yeah, rec versus medical, very much to Benny's point, like Europe. Medical is definitely still more dominant in this country. We're just shy of 40 states, and all that have a level of legalization one way or the other, medical and or recreational. But obviously, as you guys know, the last round of voting was quite a pivotal one about a year ago. So November of 2016 is when several states were attempting to vote in adult use. We did use the term recreational. We're trying to shift away from that now. So with adult use, the only state that didn't pass was Arizona. We're figuring maybe the next time around it will. But if you look at the map, just from an adult use standpoint, the West is dominant. So you have Alaska, you have Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, and then you go across the other side of the country. And while they're a little slow to get the rules and regs in place, it does take quite a bit. But you also have Florida voted medical, not recreational, but it's still a big deal because there's a high demand down there. You also have Massachusetts, Maine, I believe Maryland. So the numbers are stacking. But it is interesting because of the fact that all the markets are very unique. And that's one thing we saw. I was very thankful to have moved to Colorado and be a part of the cannabis coming into fruition back in 2014. But it's interesting because Washington was just 6 months behind us, but Washington is special, so they really didn't want to take any pointers from us, which is understandable. We were only in for 6 months, but then you take when Oregon came on board, and Oregon's like, no, we're special. So Washington and Colorado, you're doing your thing, we'll do ours, and then DC, another example where they took a totally different approach and didn't really take any notes. So I think that's the interesting thing of when it's state by state versus federal is. That's where all the states really come out in personality and saying, well, this is why we're different. This is what makes us unique. But really, are they? I mean, when it comes to consumption, no matter if it's medical or recreational, I think there is enough, synergy to be able to say, yeah, hey, Washington, let me call. And we saw a little bit of that with Nevada. Luckily, the governor of Nevada did reach out to the governor of Colorado. The feedback he got, I think, might have been a little biased. And luckily, Brian Sandoval still made the right decision as far as going towards cannabis legalization. And that's going to be an epicenter. I mean, as far as if you guys asked, everyone's got a lot of focus. It is going to be a big year in 2018 because California coming online. California is going to be the largest legal recreational state in the world, and by comparison to country too. There's 39.3 million people. If you look at Canada, which is another pivotal point for legalization come July 1st of 2018, still their population is just over 36 million. So you're talking about one state that's a larger populace than all of Canada, or even all of Australia. I mean, Australia is sitting at under 25 million. So it's crazy to see. So there's other countries that are keeping an eye on it. My friends in Ireland said that they're very much keeping a close eye to see how California rolls out. So California is special, but I think Nevada is as well. Nevada is a high transient state.
I think that even many states and countries in Europe are looking, how different states and the entire movement is coming along, especially with Canada. Canada exports like quite a bit to Europe. Like most of the medical cannabis that is in Europe comes from Canada. We only have one LP, which licensed producer for medical cannabis, and that's a company right in the Netherlands. And then of course like the Italian army is the second one. They produce the
Which
medical
they
cannabis.
put out as good a weed as our government does. With I don't know if you guys know, our government's had a program for decades now with only about I think 20 people are enrolled. But that's ditch weed, and I'd venture to guess that the
like
army
the Italian
puts out ditch
army.
weed as well.
I wouldn't know because I'm not a medical patient in Italy, but it's because they pretty much took over the process of doing that, and just for to cover the domestic medical market. It's really interesting. So it's all army grade material.
Lance, would you say it's more beneficial, do you think, to go state by state like the U.S. is doing, or go the route Canada went where it's countrywide?
I don't know. It depends if you're coming from old school mentality towards the industry or new school, right? So from an efficiency standpoint, I do believe that whole country. I applaud Canada for doing what they did and covering, across from coast to coast. Because it is uniform, and that's something that's almost expected out of that country. I mean, you look at gun regulations, you look at the medical program. They're definitely about efficiency and all in. And Trudeau, I mean, that was a big element of him moving into office, was the cannabis movement. So I applaud that. But then you look at rather comparing territories and provinces to states. States are very unique. That's the one thing I realized. Touring Australia and touring, a place like South America, there's a synergy amongst the people in those areas, and from country to country. I think even in Europe, you see a place like Greece that we didn't know what it was going to do, and they voted and they moved on and they're ready to go. So I don't know, the U.S., we're so proud of being, I'm California, I'm New York, I'm Arizona, I'm Oregon. I think that's a one thing that would have been a challenge to ever get it moved forward. But I am thankful that leaders in the union were the ones that really pushed it forward, and others will follow. I mean, I'd really like to see places like Kentucky, Tennessee, even Alabama come online. And reason being, if nothing else, I mean, from a horticulture standpoint, I mean, those aren't bad places to grow
not at
from
all.
a climate stance. So it's not the Emerald Triangle, but still, they could provide a lot of cannabis and or hemp. I mean, we have a lot of people don't know there's two sides to the plant. Hemp, by law has 0.03% or less of THC, so it's not psychoactive, but it's a phenomenal textile. You used to be able to pay your taxes back at the turn of the century, past turn century, with hemp. So it's something that was a major element in textile in this country. We're trying to bring it back, but even us working with a partner, he's like, hey, I want to bring you hemp clothing. There's just the supply and demand so tough right now. So.
And I have a lot of friends that's funny you say that about Kentucky and Alabama and Tennessee. I have a lot of friends in Iowa that are farmers, and they're buying land, not touching it, in just preparation for it to go legal there.
It's a great growing climate.
Yeah,
It is. And you can
there's a
turn
ton of land in Iowa.
4, 5, 6 crops a year, whereas you look at the cost of turning tree, the cost of turning cotton. I mean, that's something that there's no doubt that those that found this country were on the right track for making hemp a major component from an oil standpoint, again, from a textile standpoint, from paper standpoint. I mean, there's so many things that you can pull out of hemp, and you can use whole plant. That's the thing that's different. So cotton, all you have is the head. All you have is the head of the cotton. You don't have the entire plant that you can utilize. Hemp, every single bit.
Let's go on a trip. The cannabis industry, we've all been traveling a lot. Let's, can we get you to tell your airport story?
It's not. Yeah, so I was, maybe we want to talk, I'm sorry to interrupt your flow.
shifting, but
Yeah,
we'll
I
cut
know,
this
but
out.
the thing
It's
is
no
that
big deal.
we promised our listeners or viewers also to talk about Spain a little bit, because we kind of jumped over it
We jumped over Spain.
Yeah, because they have a very special thing. Because I got back to it because you spoke about the climate, and like Spain, they grow a lot because they have a lot of sun, so they have a lot of home grow. And for instance, in Portugal, which is right next door, just in case you don't know, it's they're like Tilray, which is a huge LP in Canada. They're gigantic. They're now building a grow operation there with the Portuguese government. They're going to be like the second official LP in Europe, then out of Portugal. But in Spain, the way they tackled it is that they allow private clubs, which is you at a group of friends. You're allowed to, I think you're allowed to grow like a couple of plants, something like this. So you just group together as friends and form a social club, and then you just share because not everybody can, has the same capacity. So they just throw everything together, and all the crops are being thrown together and then divided by the members of the club. So you become a member of a club.
Really interesting.
Yeah, it's a private club though. It's not public, So you only get in if you know somebody that is in the club. So you have to be recommended.
It's a secret, not speakeasy type thing.
Yeah. So it's
do you
more
like buy a building or rent out a building, or how is it at someone's
it's more
house?
really like
or?
if you go to a coffee shop, it's really like going to a bar. If you go to a social club, it's like going to some guy's living room.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
This is what it is, and then it's not, you don't buy your cannabis there. It's more like you buy the membership, and then you get your ratio of the crop that they have, and it's like usually I think it's like maximum of 5 grams a day that you're allowed to actually take out of it. But this is how it works in Spain, and it's kind of interesting approach to it.
It's really cool.
Yeah, and I think they have up to 400 or thereabout.
I think in Barcelona alone is like 200, something like this. So it's quite popular.
So it's interesting because you go up, and to his point, the differentiator between Spain, say, and UK, as we look on the map as Americans, like, oh, they're just next door neighbors. The weather, the climate specifically, literally and metaphorically, is quite different. So when you speak of social clubs in Spain, that's a brick and mortar. That's literally a social club. When I go into UK, and there's only one true social club, but there's the United Kingdom social club, but they're all virtual. So you have these social clubs that are on Facebook. and they do meet offline, but really their club is a virtual club. There's only one guy that actually has, like I said, a true storefront that is considered a club, and even then, it's a secret knock to the back door because it is all CBD is the only thing that England's even considered right now. So
Yeah, so you have to remember that like recreational cannabis is illegal all over Europe, except for coffee shops in the Netherlands. It's illegal. You're not allowed to smoke outside or anyway. It's just.
And I think the tolerances are similar, and Benny can speak to mainland Europe, but again in the UK, I mean, especially where you are, if you're smoking a joint, you have a J or something like that on the street, the Bobby will tell you put it out. He'll just be put it out, or he'll throw away your stash, especially if you only have a few grams. So just like in the States where we have different levels, right? So we have full adult use and medical programs, or the two merge, and that's the top level, let's say. And then we have medical legalization. And the thing below that a lot of people don't discuss is decriminalization. So it's or what some states call the catch and release program. So that's huge. That's pivotal, because when over 60% of the people that are incarcerated in prisons in this country are in prison because of drug offenses, and not saying all those are cannabis, but a good portion of them are. And even in the grand scheme of things, a minute holding. They might have only had an ounce. That's something that still can be considered personal consumption. In better parts of the country, it is. When Germany, people on that program are given 4 grams a day. So you can have a week's supply of cannabis, and here that's an offense. So the decriminalization is another thing to consider too, and there's a lot of states that have gone down the path of decriminalization of a catch and release, $50 fine, Drew, because I caught you with an eighth, and move on. That's saving a lot of people's destruction of life, especially the younger generations, where all it takes is that one offense, that one felony, and that throws your whole career from college to your true working career skew.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I
And
know here
obviously it doesn't work, right? It doesn't.
No.
People will still try to buy it. It's not, especially when you're young and don't think about it.
No.
So, and it's really, and my point is, why would I send anyone to the same guy that will sell you anything? Of course he will try to sell you meth and whatever, gets you hooked even quicker, if he gets a chance to do it, because it's his business and he doesn't care about it.
That's what I think gets in it. We had this discussion. There are some people who've been around it. I mean, myself growing up in San Francisco in the Bay Area, we had Berkeley. If you want to get drugs, you went to Berkeley. Acid. This is before Molly. just the entry of X. So this is before Molly and MDMA, stuff like that. But for acid, for pot, for those kind of things, there's places you went. And exactly to Benny's point, if they didn't have an eighth, maybe they had a tab of acid. So I think that's where it wasn't so much Carter as it was the Nancy Reagan era of war on drugs. Everyone started saying it's a gateway drug, And unfortunately, people like Sessions still believe in that. So I think they're kind of an arrested development from reality, because it isn't a gateway drug. Exactly to Benny's point, it's more so, I came for cannabis, but he only had X, Y, or Z. Yeah. So that's what we saw in the industry. So that's why the war on drugs didn't work.
Yeah,
it
that's
cost
what I
us
see.
money.
If you go out in Berlin, it's the same. You have the guys in the street in front of the clubs. They'll sell you anything.
Yeah. So that's a whole other kind of debate I think that's going on is a gateway. No, the people that I know that consume cannabis, I'm a medical cannabis user. Most of my friends are, but even the recreational ones now go, well, I'm out of cannabis. Let's see if we can find, a tab of acid or a line of coke or some Molly or.
Yeah, but it's true. It's all about the perception, So in Europe is a very conservative place, in most parts. True. So it's like the recognition of cannabis as a medical thing is in most places not really there. It's kind of new. Like even places like Germany, who seem to be very progressive, but we have like conservative leadership, right? So our medical cannabis program is not even a year old. So, and this is why, to come back to the airport story, like my friend, and so he's a medical cannabis patient in Germany. We're gonna say, I'm gonna loop it back in. No,
and I didn't know whether or not
he was dodging it.
I tried to.
What can I say?
Sure, it's a story about a friend.
I tried
It's not going to be embarrassed.
I tried to weave it in, as politely as I could. Thanks for you to pulling it back up.
Yeah.
No, it's basically so. Just about the perception, he's a medical cannabis patient, and he was at the airport, and just rolling one up, because he's anxious. He has it for anxiety, so he's anxious before the flight, and so he went to one of those little smoke cubicles, rolled up his joint and smoked it, and everybody's like, what the? And then, of course, police came by, took with him, and then checked everything, and eventually had to let him go, because he could prove that he's a medical patient. And there's even one guy in Bavaria, the government, because they took away his cannabis, his joint, and threw it away, right? So they had to refund him because they threw away. Yeah, I mean that's
if that
the way
happened
it
in
is.
this country.
Yeah, because it's his medicine, right? If you take away somebody's
miracle.
medicine,
Plenty of municipalities would file BK after that one.
so you better. Yeah, that's kind of.
Do we even have smoking areas at airports?
Well, in Europe they do.
Yeah,
I mean,
in Europe,
I mean,
We
in the
do
US.
here, like McCarran does, because
Inside-
McCarran
like
is a smoker
inside?
inside. So you do have fish bowls for smokers, but it's something that I've never seen anyone, with a spliff in there necessarily. But yeah, it is a designated smoking area.
So you just to digress a little bit, you brought up you're a medical patient. Do you mind talking about how cannabis affected your life and the way you became as positive about it and enthusiastic as you are? Is that fair?
Yeah, no, definitely, and I'm comfortable. We say for those of us who came out of the green closet, that's the term we use. So I came out of the green closet about a year ago while working for Weed Maps. We were actually doing a smoking hand series, as they call it. My media team was, and they had approached quite a few individuals in the company. And then they came to me, and being the head of media, I was a little surprised because normally I'm behind the scenes of things they're producing. But they said, you have a good story and we want you to share. And I said, it's a little long for Instagram format, coming from years in .com, even I knew that. So kind of in summary, I'm celebrated 14 years of being cancer-free this past November. And so while my urologist and oncologist were not necessarily fans of cannabis, it did change my way of thinking as it came to my health and just the way I take care of myself and things I do. And so over the years, cut out things like you guys know, not so much a fan of red meat anymore. Don't really drink soda, just things that can keep me on the right track for health. And then being introduced to this industry and background again, growing up in the Bay Area, I was always around. I was a little surfer kid. You can imagine the things I got into. But
water.
In the bong before the ocean. It was kind of one of those things. But then I did become straight laced because I went to San Luis Obispo for college and I was a criminal justice major. So I decided I was going to get into law enforcement and you have to change certain things. So I had not consumed cannabis in 2 decades, literally. And I was just around it. I was around all these people and being educated about the plant, being educated about the cannabinoids and how there's so much more than just THC, because that's what people think of as just a psychoactive effect of cannabis. And then what really hit at home was, these children that were migrating up to Colorado from places like Texas and Oklahoma and Iowa that had epileptic seizure issues, and they're being given either Charlotte's Web or RSO, Rick Simpson oil, and they're dropping from 95 seizures per week to 5. And then some of them have actually had streaks of weeks or months without seizures. I'm like, there's something here. There's something healthy here. So for me, obviously, by this point, already cancer-free and all that, but did still have a bit of issues. And I used to compete water skiing when I was a kid. I ran cross country in high school. And so my knees and ankles aren't the best. And so like most people, I'd utilize Tylenol, Advil, ibuprofen. And when the study came out for ibuprofen a few years ago about just how damaging and taxing it is on your kidneys and liver, I was like, I think there might be something more natural. And so I am proud to say I definitely am a fan of CBD. I see it as a resource in many respects. But obviously, I do appreciate the entourage effect too. Something that I gave Benny something to try that really helps me with sleep as well as with the pain. And it's a pill, it's a multi-stack, it's predominantly CBD, but does have a little bit of THC to help with the entourage effect for delivery, which is nice, But I asked him how it worked. He said, he's on a different time zone. For him, 3 a.m. is like lunchtime back home. So he kept
I don't
saying,
even know what you're talking about.
he doesn't even know what time it is. So he kept telling me he's getting up at, he kept saying he's getting up at 3 or 4 in the morning. I'm like, okay, why don't you try this? Because I think, he appreciates it from a medicinal standpoint too. And he said, I didn't wake up till 6 something this morning. And unlike sleeping pills, like we were talking a little bit before the show about Ambien and some of these, excessively used prescription drugs, unlike those drugs, no side effects, no hangover. Like I feel like I should today. And that gets into the fact that we all have endocannabinoid systems. CB1 receptors, CB2 receptors. CB1 receptors interact with THC, CB2 receptors interact with CBD. So our body is designed to take it. And I was talking to a chemist one time that was working on a formula for cancer patients, because cancer patients are paying as much as $5 per pill. So you're talking about a single bottle costing $500. This chemist and his friends were able to come up with something comparable that's a derivative from cannabis for 10 cents a pill. So he said, of course, he'd love to own a Porsche and a nice house, but he didn't do that exercise to get rich. He did it to prove that Mother Nature provides things that help our ailments, and they don't have to be grown out of a petri dish or out of a chemist's lab. So, it's things like that, again, where it just opened my eyes, to how much an impact it can make.
Okay, so I was coming out of the green closet. I smoked a tremendous amount of cannabis when I was a young man. And it was the social aspect about it. It was naughty to be using, we called it pot or weed, or we should have a conversation at some point about words. And
the slang, we talked, that has shown itself, universal slang terms.
But it was naughty, so the rebellious youth was inclined to want to do it. Mm-hmm. So today, with all the and I don't know what the social aspect was in Germany. Did you have it around when you were a kid?
No.
Okay. So
my parents. If you think about of course, like the '68 generation. My parents, they were hippies. Probably they had smoked. My mother, she was a chain cigarette smoker. Obviously, it's for us. It's like the perception. I remember like the first cannabis show that I went to. I still had this little thing. Like, wow, there are kids here and the families here. This is how we are
in the international space. They bring kids to the shows, and they don't in the U.S. Yeah. I found that as being very interesting.
Yeah. So for me, it was like, still because I was brought up with like being like from the past 61 UN Charter generation. So this is a bad thing. Everybody in school told us this is a bad thing. So it's like, they're bringing kids. And at the Cannabis in Prague, they even had a childcare center. You can leave your kids there, and just walk around. You see a lot of elderly people, and entire families
That's
coming
what they had at
along.
Expo Weed. I just got back from Chile. The same thing. They had a kids area. They had a children's, and there were children's and family. But I think there's a level of respect. Like I saw that at Expo Weed. There were people openly consuming, but it was very tamed. It wasn't what you'd think, because you had to come in, you had to make sure you blah blah blah. Yeah, you're allowed.
Of course, at the shows in Europe, you're not allowed to smoke. It's because it's still illegal. So
the question is now, with there being so much acceptance, or a blooming attitude of acceptance across all the cannabis markets about cannabis being therapeutic, cannabis being positive. Does it create less of a pickup rate for the youth because it's not rebellious? Is that even a thing?
That's been another topic that's come up. So a lot of people, I let people know I'm a microdoser is a term that I use, and it's a term that can be used ambiguously with anything when it comes to medication. But so I'm like a 5 milligram, 10 milligram guy. There's some people who are consuming, 1,000 milligrams in one chocolate bar, dare I say, which is insane in my mind, because that's not something I need for my health. But yeah, that's, now I've started hearing out of Silicon Valley, the guys up there microdosing acid. It's like, wait, are they doing that because pot's legal now in California, so now they have to do something else? So I don't know if that. The one thing I will say, though, that I learned from the millennials and even from the Z generation, because the Z generation just graduated college last year, so that is the next gen. So sorry, millennials, you're turning into Gen Xers. Kind of fun, but I'm turning into a baby boomer, so it's not funny. Just bumped up a tier.
Welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you.
AARP has not hit me up yet. So, but it is interesting because those generations, when you talk about the Gen Y and the Gen Z, both they're going to consume. If they want to consume, they're going to consume. If it's legal or not, it's irrelevant. If it's something, if I want to smoke pot, I'm going to smoke pot. So this whole thing where I think it might more so you, the Carter generation, and again me, the Nancy Reagan generation, drugs are bad, frying pan with the egg, this is your brain on drugs, blah blah blah. All that stuff does need to be worn off, because that was something that was so masterminded, and we won't get in depth, but Carter did some uncool things with his campaign, essentially against minorities and against the hippies of the 60s with this whole, war.
I wasn't around for this.
Yeah,
neither was I can say.
And even if you think that even this entire decriminalization thing in Europe is not that old. You know, I remember when I was a kid, you know, it's like, oh wow, now you're not getting arrested for having cannabis on you. You know, if you have a small like personal amount, which in Germany, for instance, it depends on which state you're in. You know, so Berlin is kind of liberal and Bavaria is zero. You know, it's zero tolerance. So you'll be in Berlin, you not even get a fine. They just take it away from you as long as it's like below 15 grams or something. So they acknowledge that, you know. Also, if you think about all the paperwork and everything that's attached to it, you know, and it's just, I mean, and we have access, you know, we have access to alcohol. And, you know, it's just a funny
When did you have
thing.
your first beer? How old were you?
Oh, probably 14.
That's what I guess.
Yeah,
That's my
legal
friend's
age
beer.
for beer in Germany is 16, and you can buy it at every supermarket and everywhere, you know. So if you go to one of those little kiosks in the streets, you know, you don't really have them here. But like Berlin really lives off these, we call them Späti, Spätkauf. It's just a kiosk, and you can buy everything. They're 24/7. It's like a 7-Eleven a little bit, you know. So they, but they have everything: beer, you know, wine.
But were your
booze.
folks sharing alcohol in the home early in your life? I mean, was it something that was normal?
Yeah, it's very normal. We drink every day.
But
you
that's
know?
the difference between it's interesting, and maybe a double standards applied. But over in Europe, that my friends over there, and Benny fits the mold as well. It's everything in moderation. I mean, that's the mentality. It's like everything. It doesn't matter if it's food, alcohol, smoking. Everything's in moderation. Where everything here is in excess. You know, and again, that's applicable to food and alcohol and everything is in excess in the States. So that's one thing I think that's interesting.
I'm a soccer fan, so I tend to have
That might be a little in
excessive alcohol from time to time.
Yeah. Das football is good.
So take us across let's go across the pond the other way. Let's talk about Australia. You just spent some time in Australia, and most of us have no clue what's happening in Australia. Talk about that.
It's in an interesting place. So Australia did technically vote legalization on medical a few years back because of what's going on in the government there. Not to be too surprised, but there's people in place, you know, in Parliament that unfortunately they have ties to the big pharmaceutical companies. So they're going through this whole vaccination of everyone on the continent. And a lot of people are pushing back because they know the motive. The motive is financial gain. So they've really put cannabis on the back burner. It's unfortunate. There's product that's actually sitting in warehouses outside of Sydney that they can't do anything with. And it's CBD. I mean, this is straight health attribution stuff. And they're staying on it. The one thing I am proud to say that the woman who just came into Parliament over in New Zealand, she's very much a forward thinker. She has a Trudeau mentality as far as, okay, this is the 21st century kind of mentality. And so we see the plausibility of New Zealand moving forward as soon as 2020. Now, it's a much lesser populace. Again, you're talking about just under 25 million in Australia. You're talking about 4 million on the island of New Zealand. And it's not just a skip away. I mean, it's 3 or 4 hour plane ride. But I think that says a lot because the fact that where are Australians going to vacation now? I mean, a lot of them went to Bali, and that's common as well. But the fact that they can take a 3-hour flight and consume cannabis and go snow skiing, I mean, that it's a no-brainer.
It's a win-win.
So yeah, it's one of those things where I think Australia really needs to wake up, but they are in a good place. I mean, there definitely is a culture there. To Benny's point, just like Europe and South America, it's very much a grow country. So that's what we find is, you know, here, because we are such consumers and we are so much more on the capitalist side, I think there will be a lot more production and purchase here as opposed to home grow. But it's nice to see that the industry is strong. And it was a great tour. I landed in, you know, props to the Magical Butter guys who were my host and a few other people in the industry. We all got together and we made this pilgrimage. I actually wrote a story on it. I'll have to share the link with you guys. I hadn't written in years because I wrote for about 5 years before I got into a publisher position, GM position. And I had to write a story because it was just such an awesome experience. The people are fantastic. The culture there in general, but the culture as it applies to cannabis, you know, I met a lot of hippies with an Aussie accent. That's the one thing I liked. You know, we ended up in this town called Nimbin, and they have the Mardi Gras every year. And that was their 25th anniversary. So I thought it was pivotal for what better first experience than the 25th anniversary. Over 10,000 people migrated there. And again, when you think of a whole country populace around 25 million, to have 10,000 people go there, I mean, we wouldn't get 10,000 people to show up for the 420 rally in Colorado. And that's obviously a 5.6 million population state, but there's plenty of states all around it. So going there, I mean, if I dropped you guys into Nimbin, this is a cool thing. You would feel like you were in Mendocino and all the way down the dreadlocks, the clothing, like the natural hemp cloth, everything about it, and the passion about the plant. And that's really Max Stone, who's the head of the Hemp Embassy, which is right in the middle of town. I mean, this is you blink, you miss it. It's a very small, quaint town, very tight-knit community. But Max and the team are fantastic guys, and his mantra is free the plant. That's all. Free the plant, free the. We did a march from one side of town to out in front of the police headquarters, carrying a.
Just the two of you? Oh, yeah.
I was probably the only American.
Do that every evening.
There's a few. I met a few that
I like
were
walking.
expats. As they say. But no, we carried the world's largest inflatable joint. So they own that, literally. I'll show you the pictures. They own that. And so anyway, so it was an awesome experience, though. And I'm going back again this year. So.
I have a question. What is their view on America and Americans in relation to cannabis? I mean, obviously we're in it and we have our own perspectives of the outside world, but what do they view of us?
Yeah, their view, they definitely, it's interesting because Aussies, their background. I mean, essentially that was a prison to the Queensland. That was Great Britain's little island to put the bad people. And so they don't necessarily have the fondest feeling towards the UK. They more so associate themselves with America because, again, if you look at our history, we were also kind of pushed away from the motherland. So it's a similarity. And the same thing I sensed when I was in Ireland as well. The Irish are very much, I feel like they kind of associate themselves more so with us than they do anyone over in proper UK, right? Or be Scots, Welsh.
Like pretty much everybody except the UK.
Yes.
It could be anybody if it's
I
not.
guess I point out
as
the
long
obvious.
as they're not English.
The monarchy is not loved.
The Irish actually think they're closer to the Germans than they do to the
Oh, yeah.
I, being of English descent, I do still have a level of respect, but I think they do associate with us and they do understand the culture. So my experience, there's about 15 different strains that I came across, and I literally came across everything from what we call ditchweed, which is stuff that odorless, tasteless. I mean, it's just, it's almost like grass in a bag. That's probably where the expression grass came from. Just really bottom barrel to this one gentleman who, he brought almost like a humidor, brought this case, and he had 1 gram sample packs of, I think it was 8 different strains total that he wanted to share with me. And he got all these genetics from either Europe or America. So he's like, these strains are from, Spain. This strain is from Finland. This strain. And then he goes on, this strain is from Humboldt. This strain is from Eureka. So he had all these different strains. And sure enough, I mean, he had OG Kush, he had the hazes, he had everything short of cookies as far as the popular stuff. So I was really impressed, but they do very much see Americans as a leader. It really is. The Emerald Triangle is what we call it. That's 3 counties up in Northern California, Humboldt, Trinity, and Eureka. That is the Champaign region to cannabis. It's the most ideal climate. The soil is phenomenal. The weather, the temperatures, like we were talking about with Spain, is spot on. And it translates into South Oregon. And that's where the movement's going to be with growers, because California, again, once you get the government involved, I hate to say it, but things are going to be more challenging. You're not going to be able to just go, this weed didn't cure right, I can blow it off on the black market. No, you have to incinerate it. So it's going to make things really challenging. So I have some grower friends who are like, we migrated over the border. They're up in Medford, they're up in Grants Pass, they're up in Jacksonville, or even as far as Eugene. A little bit different moisture up there, but still an ideal climate. So
the future is bright for cannabis. One thing we need to mention is if you have questions. Scott, if I had a question, what would I do?
You can reach us on our social medias at Boveda Cannabis on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and YouTube, actually. And just hashtag Ask Boveda, and we will respond. And maybe even make a podcast around your question.
And it's at Boveda Cannabis on...
Yes, at Boveda Cannabis.